Australia has become a tyrannical COVID hellhole. Citizens of that country are being stripped of their freedoms and forced into coronavirus quarantine camps when they enter their own country. Here's how one Australian described his experience in one of those camps.
We're all just waiting patiently to be fed. It's like when you shake the bag of the dog treats and the dogs come running. We're all just outside waiting. Just had the cops come around and tell this woman off staying over here as well. Because there was about 5 seconds in between her taking a sip of her cup of tea and she took her face mask down. Cops came around literally on the dot and just pulled her up for it, and she said, well, I'm drinking my tea, and they said, well, not right now, you're not, put your face mask on. It's a bit intense.
An Australian senator named Alex Antic was also forced into a quarantine camp even though he didn't even have the coronavirus. He recently came on this show to warn Americans how our freedoms are also at stake.
This is the lesson for the United States. Parliaments all over the country in Australia have gifted unrivaled powers to their bureaucrats. And they did so on the basis that we were told there was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. They never did so on the basis that there were going to be 2 years to keep people locked down and mandate vaccinations. The bureaucrats everywhere across the world, but certainly in Australia it's true, they never like to get out of the warm bed of power and coercive control.
Yes.
They won't do it here, and I tell you, they are holding on for dear life.
Alex Antic is the Australian senator you just saw in that video, and he joins me now. Alex, welcome to the program. First of all, as an American, I watch these videos of what happens with law enforcement arresting people who are out without a mask outside. Hear your story. It's absolutely outrageous. But you said you were quarantined in the COVID camp and you didn't have coronavirus. Were there other people that were quarantined in those camps that didn't have the virus as well?
Well, Sean, look, thanks for having me. Look, the answer is yes. There have been many who have been quarantined in a similar sort of way, and that's part of the issue here. One of the problems that we've had, as I think I said to Tucker in the previous clip, was that we have been we were told originally that this was a 2-week to flatten the curve scenario, and ever since in this country we've been pursuing a zero COVID strategy rather than a suppression strategy. So the levels of testing have been extraordinary. The levels of caution have been draconian. I mean, in my example, I was detained in what is known as a Medi hotel, which is basically a repurposed hotel with a metal fence around down the bottom, police guards down the bottom. Hearing the commentary from the person that was in one of the detention facilities earlier there is very true. There were meals produced 3 times a day. The door was knocked on like you're in prison. You weren't allowed to come out too soon to get it or too late to get the meal. All of these rules have been effectively put on the Australian people by an unchecked and uncontrolled bureaucratic class in this country. That is the very nub of what's happened in Australia. And that is the lesson for the United States. We are, I guess, a standard bearer for what happens when the political class all across a nation throw the keys to the bureaucracy and allow them to make the rules up as they go along. That's what we're seeing in Australia. It's dangerous, and places like the United States should do well to learn our lesson.
Yeah, but Alex, obviously it's outrageous that you were quarantined when you didn't have COVID, but what I found outrageous was that you actually have COVID camps, that you actually are putting people in against their will. That's fascinating, but just give us a set of ideas of what it's like to live in Australia right now. What kind of measures are in place to try to stop the spread of COVID that's been implemented by the government?
Well, what we're seeing, if you open the window at the moment, you'd see Australia as it used to be. I mean, it does look like Australia on the outside, but the feeling is quite different. The sort of authoritarian creep into this country is quite astonishing, really. I mean, we 2 years ago were a country probably very much like you used to see in those old Paul Hogan ads with throwing a shrimp on the barbie, sailing around on the Sydney harbour and being very carefree and fanciful. Now we're living in a country where, in many instances, because of safety, because of control and fear and this necessity to push this zero COVID strategy, the bureaucrats in this country have taken the reins of power in many instances. We're seeing things like now, instead of going into some of these camps now, in certain circumstances where the discretion is applied by the bureaucracy, you're able to download what is known as the Home Quarantine app, which is effectively a piece of software which goes on your phone. It rings you 3 times a day from your home. It takes your facial biometric data and your GPS location. And if it doesn't all match up, then the police come knocking on your door. This is the sort of stuff that you see in Xinjiang in China. And I'm very concerned that Australia is becoming a test case for a brand new social credit system. This is not something that we want. It's not a path we want to go down, Sean.
And Alex, hopefully the Australians will stand up and push back on this. There's a lot of protests that are happening. Hopefully more will join and you can regain your freedom and get back to where you were in those Crocodile Dundee days. That'd be great. Thanks for joining me tonight, Alex.
Thanks a lot, Sean. Thanks for having me.